that with his background as a scientist. He's also involved in fundraising for important causes such as cancer research and epilepsy, and has organized several events to raise awareness and funds to support epilepsy programs and cancer research. Today, Marco is going to be talking about Perispirit, the archive of our history. This lecture will be delivered in Portuguese, so if you need to get your translation to Portuguese, get your... In English. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think that's what I said. In Portuguese, oh, sorry, no, this is going to be in English. So if you need to get your translations to Portuguese, please do it. Okay, so let's welcome Marco, and the stage is yours.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for the invitation. Being here today is an absolute pleasure. My family's here too. That's amazing. Hi, Daniel. So excited. And it's nice to be here, not only with all of you, our spiritual friends present, and so many great speakers that are here delivering such important information about Allan Kardec and Spiritism and all the aspects associated with it. So the first thing I'm going to say, I have some disclosures to do. First of all, I actually am a real scientist, trained in work. That's my job, that I go to work and I kind of generate hypotheses and test things. And because of that, I typically question everything, and that's fine. So if you don't know me, if I have questions about everything, that's totally fine. It's not personal. And the other thing is that, you know, I work with mediumship too. So, you know, we heard today that, you know, mediumship is like, you know, is a tool that sometimes spirituality will give you to kind of speed up your process of growing as a spirit. So I have 2 hits already. In other words, actually, I'm not that smart and I'm not that good. And by the way, I'm here just to try to deliver information to you guys in a way that maybe we have some interesting understanding of some difficult concepts, but I have a lot to learn. That's the most important thing. And I think if you learn that, you get nice, good steps into Spiritism. Okay, so let's get started. How this works. Beautiful. Okay, so today we're talking about to me is probably one of the most exciting things. If you look at all the more technical aspects of Spiritism, this will be probably one of the most important because it connects almost everything we heard today. It connects everything we heard about magnetism and mediumship. It connects, you know, how you interact with the spiritual world, and connects how our physical worlds interact with the spiritual world. So really, it's this bonding mechanism that connects everything we're talking about. And obviously, you can now bring from the moral concepts of Spiritism, right? That's actually the most important one, as Kardec says in the Gospel According to Spiritism. And the Perispirit will allow us to understand how that bridge is made, right, between all these wonderful things of mediumship and more the down-to-earth critical things of learning, like how can we love one another, right? And you know, we need to bridge those, and I think this is an excellent way for us to get that conversation going. Now, obviously, when you look at an individual level, right, we know, and we've been here already for long enough now to understand that we are made of different things, right? We have our physical body, right, which is kind of represented there by that little brain and a face. We also have this, we are spirits, right? But the spirit, if you go back to the Kardec, very early on, when you're talking about the first questions on the spirit's book, there's going to be some questions about the creation of the universe, and the spirit answering the questions of Kardec are very clear. And they're going to say, well, there's like these 2 different things. There's this material element that comes from universal cosmic fluid, that comes from direct thought of the creator. And there's this other component, which is the spirit, which we cannot tell you what this is. It's just like too much. We don't have the processing power or language or understanding to really know for a fact what is actually spirit. But we are one. Now, like as a scientist, my mind just literally, I lost it right there. Because I'm like, okay, how I'm going to put it all back together and start to question things. And that's how I got into Spiritism. So I got into Spiritism by actually challenging every line. And funny enough, by the end of the last book of Kardec, I found myself in a very interesting spot that I'm normally not at. I could not find a reasonable way to disprove what was being talked about, right? And imagine, like, I'm talking to my colleagues, which most of them are basically atheists. And I'm talking about, well, what about just the concept that the intelligence actually does not reside in your cells, but resides in this interesting form that we can't really tell what it is. It connects to us by this other form that we call perispirit, that also we don't know exactly what it is. And that's actually where we come from. If you're thinking right now, it's actually not your body's thing. Well, think about that. Now, for someone who works in cell biology and mechanism of cell communication, that absolutely killed me. Like I probably had a whole year just kind of going back and trying to figure out what's going on, right? But at the same time thinking like, well, this explanation is 1,000,000 times better than me saying that specific neurotransmitters in a specific sequence activated by the sequence of activation of cells will tell me what I'm thinking. Now, which one makes more sense? I know science obviously has great elements to explain how does processing memories and all that works in your brain. And I'm 100% that's all true. But the fact is that knowledge does not come from that neurotransmitter. The neurotransmitter is a sequence that occurs after the spirit interacts with your brain. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. That's where the perispirit comes from. So all that baggage, the trials, the previous lives, like all those memories, they all come, to us through this semi-material body that we call the perispirit, right? And we're going to go a little bit more in detail very soon. Now, the topic today is perispirit is this archival system, right? Now, when I started doing the lecture, I went to ChatGPT, why not? Like we always do that, right? And I said, ChatGPT prompt, please drive to me an archival of my history. That's exactly what my title is, right? And I want you to include certain names on it, including, as you see there, some past lives and schools and trials. And that's what ChatGPT came up with. And I'm like, ooh, that's ingenious because he left some empty boxes. He left some boxes where the labels are kind of off position, which is kind of, yeah, that's totally me. And with my talk, I'll probably, like with the way I see things, I'll probably go there and rearrange these things all the time. But that was not enough. Like, I was like, okay, that's my archival, but how does that translate into a perispirit, right? That's when I went back to Kardec, which is, always a very wise thing to do, right? And Kardec's going to tell us this, right? And as you can see there, the humans are made of just 3 different things, right? And the first, obviously, is the body, right? Our physical body that we can see, interact, touch. That's who we are right now, right? Similar to that, and then we have, well, our body is not different from any type of living thing in this planet, right? I know we try to say that we're so evolved and smart and all those things, but realistically, the same carbon that's living in your body right now was part of a dinosaur. Think about it. We've been recycled these atoms of carbon over and over and over. We've been reorganizing them in a way that makes more sense for our spirit, right? So who's the driver of this, right? That's exactly where it's come from. And animated by the same vital principle. So everything that is alive has the vital principle, which is part of the creation of the universe, right? And then second, the soul, the immaterial being, right? The spirit incarnated in the body. And the third is that link that unites the body and then the intermediate process between the spirit and the body. That's how the spirit connects with matter and vice versa, how that matter interacts with the spirit, right? And ChatGPT wins it again, because I asked ChatGPT, can you draw to me a body, some sort of a spirit, and some sort of an interconnected body connected to them? ChatGPT is learning my thoughts right now, and he came up with this perispirit, which has this little ties with the body and the spirit, which I found really cool, right? So that's what we have there. So we're going to go through now these 3 different components, right? So we start with the physical body, and I'm going to be showing a lot of things that I do in my work, right? Because as a pathologist and a scientist that's kind of study the body and tissues. That's my job, right? And I really like André Luiz in Conduta Espírita. He's going to say this. So the body is the first loan received by the incarnate spirit. How powerful is that? We're on a loan, right? It's like, you know, we need to get a car to go somewhere. I can't get there. How do I get there, right? How do I live in it? So like you can loan something, like you can borrow it, right? Use it, right? Grow, get places, right? Learn, and then you would give it back. Otherwise, you're going to pay a lot of money, right? You're going to be in debt. But you give it back. You know, in this case, we give our bodies back to the planet. So the planet will actually renew it and use it again, right? So the physical body, and we can see here, and this is an interesting, just a representation of, you know, on a very basic level, and I apologize for that. If you really like to see complicated things, I'll show you one, okay? So I have things for everyone coming up. But, you know, this is like how science does things in a way. So you have our cortex and represented there that technically is connected to all cells in our body through different ways. And all the cells respond to a number of complex systems that go downstream and upstream from that pathway. That will be through neurons, to hormones, to all different types of mechanisms that your body has that will connect what you're thinking or what you want to do with the action related to it. So, you know, if you think about, you know, I want to move, so your cortex will process that. You then fire this neuron that goes through the neuromuscular junction, activate the muscle fiber, and the muscle fiber moves exactly like your brain decided to do, right? That's the physical component of it. And that's kind of represented on the right side here, right? Now, if you go now, for those who like things that are really complicated, this is actually from my work. I'm going to show it 1 second. There you go. So that's actually from my work. I know the cartoons look very nice, but this is actually a real tissue section from a patient that has a particular disease, in this case called squamous cell carcinoma, right? And as you can see here, all those little nice colorful dots, they're all individual cells. They're all talking to each other. They're all coordinating together to make you survive, right? So every one of these colors represent a different marker of expression of something, right? In this case, in the top here, you have keratin, that's the green, mark epithelial cells. You have some inflammatory markers. You have all these little funny things that, you know, identify each one of those cell types, right? And this is not as complicated as it gets. We can go to super resolution levels and see molecule levels interacting with every one of those cells that interacts with tissues, that interacts with the brain, right? It's very complicated. But anyways, they work together as a team. How cool is that? So now you can think about this, like the question is then, like who's coordinating this team? Like we all have work, right? We're working somewhere or we do something at home. So we coordinate some sort of actions together, right? So think about this. Think about you go to work, you have a team of, I don't know, right? Raquel here has a team of 20 people working for her. So, you know, she's like, you know, guys, we need to finish this job. We have this project. There's a deadline. I don't know, she talks to me all the time about this. And it is like, you know, let's get this project done. So she needs to define position, rules, sequence of events, checkups, and all that. Who's doing what? Like grab hands, not, you know, emails all the time. Now, this team here that you're looking at has about 3 billion people working for them just on this tissue, right? Just on this tissue, not the whole body. Just talking about here, right? So now you have this 3 billion machines that work in sync, right? And they have to coordinate efforts to achieve a specific function. How cool is that? That's your body at work, right? Now, and if you're thinking that it's just your neuron that's doing all of this, now we have a problem. Right? Because now you have to realize that there's a little bit more to this. This is more complicated than just Raquel firing emails and being upset with her team, right? We need to have a better system. Right? That's where Spiritism now starts to get really into the other part of this. So from a cell biologist, I'm a trained cell biologist. That's what I did. I studied it. From a cell biologist perspective, no matter how much you study subcellular mechanisms, so how things work and move in the body, there's always questions that are not answered. And now studying Spiritism about 15 years ago, when I got into Spiritism, again, because I was very stubborn and I questioned everything and I thought I was going to disprove Kardec for sure, until I realized that, well, kind of exactly opposite happened. That's why I'm here talking to you guys. Now I realize that, wait a minute, the Perispirit makes sense. Because now if you look back at this, and now we're talking about Spiritism, Spirit's book question, what would our body be if it did not have a soul and a spirit to connect them, right? The spirits are going to answer it. A mass of flesh without intelligence, anything you might want to call it, whatever it is, it will be nothing, right? It will be just a bunch of cells going completely crazy and do whatever they want, which is kind of what we do most of the time, right? Because we lack a little bit of that coordination, right? So, and it continues in the Spirit's book, the introduction, the Spirit's book. And by the way, I really want you guys to read the introduction of the Kardec over and over, because I realized that you got a window into Kardec's mind. So it helps you understand concepts like mediumship, for example. And why do we study mediumship to start with? So they say, the link of perispirit unites the body and the spirit. It's sort of a semi-material envelope, right? So death of the physical body destroys only the denser envelope, the one you can touch, right? The body, right? But retains the perispirit. So that's even more interesting now, because the spirit is the only thing that really cycles between incarnate and discarnate and continues the same, exactly. Remember the archive system? Right now it starts to make sense. So if the perispirit is tagged along with you as a spirit, no matter the journey you're taking, so every road you're going to take and every mission you go and every time you make a catastrophic mistake, that's going to now be imprinted and carried with you on your perispirit, right? So much so that this is what I like to see, though. And this is not very original. I'm not saying that I created this. Oh, this is ChatGPT again. But the concept has been used many, many times to explain different things. So the concept is, if you were the photographer in this image, right, the perispirit will be the film or the CMS that's capturing that electronics photon, right, that memorizes the image on the camera. So in other words, this is how the perispirit should look like to you. It's like it captures images, capture impulses and messages and things that are now exposed over your perispiritual body, and you can take them with you, right? So if the perispirit works like a camera, right, that memorizes those images, right? You can think about, it could be something happy, like a happy, I asked ChatGPT to the happy person, take a picture. And now I asked it to do like a kind of not so happy person, take a picture. So this is, the opposite is true. So if something happens that may be slightly deleterious in a way, that is also stored in the perispiritual body. So why is that important? Because let's go back to the beginning. So if the perispirit binds your spirits to your body and kind of goes back and forth when incarnated, discarnated, and you keep with that. And now it's memorizing all those imageries and stories and thoughts and emotions all over it. So basically, when you get a fresh new body coming up, those imageries, those marks are going to be passed along to your new body. Now, that's a really cool concept. And this is what I want to introduce now, because that explains a lot about almost everything we study in spirit, right? Now think about this. Think about an incident or situation where someone, has this thought of action of hurting their own bodies, for example, right? The action, the concept, the idea, and the physical act were all going to be stored in your perispiritual body or perispirit in a specific site, in a specific way. So even so, when you go out in the spiritual world, the first thing spirits are going to do is like see everything you've done, because it's all there stamped all over your perispirit, right? That's kind of scary, isn't it? I probably want to have to say, put a big parenthesis here, right? So Marco me being all this, I think I know this stuff, right? when I started to realize the concept that from a spiritual perspective, we are translucent, transparent, and people can see everything we've done, good, wrong, good or bad, right? And there's no way for you to hide it. Now I can clearly understand why some spirits discarnate and go completely out of it, right? Can you imagine your worst secret? And you look at yourself, it's actually stamped right here in your chest, and everyone else can see, oh, haha, that's what you've done, you know? That's kind of scary. But at the same time, we also know that we're going to have a chance to redeem that and change that. And that's why Spiritism has this powerful message, right? So let's continue on in our story here. So now I showed that same picture looking at the body side, physical body. Now I'm putting back the spirit, which I intentionally just drew it as something blank kind of thing, because we don't know exactly how it is. But then we have the perispirit and how the perispirit connects to each one of those cells. And this is incredible information that comes from Evolution in Two Worlds, chapter 5. And they describe exactly how, you know, the connection, right, between your perispirit to your body occurs at a single level of cell. So each one of those trillions of cells that we're talking about, they're connected directly to the perispirit, exactly like that. Okay. So let's go to the next one. Now, interesting here is though, the connection is not a one-way road, right? So in other words, we can imprint changes into the body from what we carry on the perispirit, but the body can also imprint changes in the perispirit in the other way around, right? So it's a two-way road, right? And this two-way road will really determine who we are, right? Now from a spiritual perspective. Because now if the perispirit is connecting every one of our cells, now think about the initial idea that we had that basically your neurons or your cortex controls the function of all the tissues in your body. Some of them not necessarily related to the cortex, they can be auto-regulated, like we heard about the heart, for example. It has its own electric impulses. So it actually, yeah, it doesn't need the brain that much to do that. For your breathing, for example, we have the cerebellum that organizes non-conscious responses. So you breathe even if you don't want to, kind of thing, you know, you don't think about it. But in general, you know, you need that mechanism, right, of controlling self. Now we have a much more elegant way of explaining this, that it's not exactly how that works. So your perispirit controls not only all your brain cortex functions, your cerebral functions and all that, but also connects to each one of those cells individually. So in a way, we're the boss. But our teams, like trillions of people working for us right now, in each one of those cells, they have the capacity to survive, generate energy, move, talk to each other, and go crazy. They can do that too, right? We know that. So our job becomes a little bit more complicated than our film job. Sorry. But now, in reality is, now I want you guys to think about you, and you can actually look at you right now. Think about this. You are a spirit that is intricately connected to every single one of those molecules and cells in your body, directly through your perispirit. And you are in control of every one of those cells. Everyone. So thinking that way, well, brings you a little bit more responsibility. Oh, it's a little bit of a challenge, but also gives you a nice, beautiful path towards being a better person and growing and dealing with diseases and stresses and all those things we talked about. Like even the mediumship of cure we talked about. What that is, right? That's all coming through this mechanism that we're talking about. And there's another mechanism that we're not going to talk about today. It can be another lecture, but do I deserve it or not? That's another level. Complicated, right? But think about the physical effects of it. this is what's happening, right? And we are always in control. Okay? Now, I can keep going. Now, in the evolution of two worlds, and I mean, most of what I've been talking about is evolution of two worlds, but which I find an excellent way to understand this. So Journalist is going to say this in chapter 17. The disease, they're talking about disease processes, right? And now that we know that we're actually in command, right, of all of us, so that generally now makes sense. The disease emerges when the patient, without humility, patience, spirit of service, devotion to the good, cannot assimilate the beneficent currents that divine love is circulating incessantly. Oh my God, look at that word. Like, basically, there's always good stuff coming from everywhere around us. It's coming. We don't connect to it. That's our decision. But it's incessant. In other words, it doesn't stop. The source doesn't stop. It keeps coming, right? It's coming from there. From the so we are immersed in the creative thought of our Father, Mother, God. Think about that. It's so powerful, right? So it continues to come up. All creatures, though different and innumerable agents, are all stimulated to the maximum benefit of existence on Earth. Okay, so if I'm a spirit with a perispirit that connects to every one of single my cells, and I'm receiving this higher level energy that comes, what is making that connection? Not clear, right? So that energy comes through your perispirit, connects to every one of your cells, and that's how we make that very important connection with the above, right? So the disease comes when we stop that flux, we stop that process, right? That's what Andrea Louise is leading this concept, right? But the good news is we can change it. It's gonna say very soon. So also evolution two worlds, they're gonna come up with this concept that I really find, and if you really understand this, it will make a lot of sense and will probably help you a little bit, because I have to say, it helped me a ton, right, to understand things on a different level. So almost all of them, and this is what Louise can explain, appear as a secondary phenomena over the zones of unhealthy disposition. So what are the zones of unhealthy disposition? Do you remember the picture guy taking a picture with the camera, right? And that image, that energy coming through and being imprinted on your perispirit. So that can create an area of predisposition, right? Or changes to your perispirit, right? And these areas, the connection, that's what Andrea is saying now. The connection between those cells, the workers, right, of your physical body, and you as a spirit becomes problematic. They do not work in sync anymore. And that's what I represent here. They say the imbalance of our mental forces generates ruptures or breaking points, right? Between, or break of continuity points between the spiritual body, perispirit, and the physical vehicle. And I drew those boxes there to kind of help you out. Don't judge my judgment of my PowerPoint skills. I'll do ChatGPT next time. Okay, but this is to represent to you that now think about a team of 2 billion cells in a tissue working together, and now you lost control of them. Your emails are unanswered. You can't book meetings. You tried everything you've done. They're not working well with you. That's when that lack of control would cause changes to the tissue level, to the cell level, that would now cause something that we call a disease. How powerful is that? Because now, at the same time, it's kind of shocking because you're kind of, oh, I guess it's all my fault anyways, right? No, but it gives you this incredible tool to change these things around. I'll give you an interesting example. I had someone that worked with me in the lab for a while, and she was working with cell line cell cultures, right? And we have this tendency of thinking that, you know, cancer cells are immortal, like they're super strong, resist everything. That's actually not true. Cancer cells die more than any other cells, but they also grow more. That's what makes them kind of tough, right? So that's why when you hear the studies, like someone said, oh, someone took, I don't know, took a leaf of a tree and they put it in a petri dish with cancer cells, they all die. This is a cure of cancer. It's not, right? If I change 1% the concentration of serum in that cell, they die too, right? And that means nothing, right? It's just like a little interesting path that I like to talk about. Okay, let's go back to the lecture before Teresa, gets upset with me. But she used to culture these cells, and her cell cultures grew faster than anyone else in the lab. I had at the time 18 people doing cell culture at the same time in my lab. Same cell line, it's a clonal cell, so they're all the same, right? The same media that comes from the same source. And I have to say that I trained them well enough that they maybe could do the basics of cell culturing, right? So I'm not expecting a huge variation of the cell culture. Her cells grew at about 3 times faster than everyone else. If I switch the plates, her new plates also grew about 2 to 3 times faster than everyone else. So I was like, okay, there's something going on here, right? So one day I bring her in and was like, listen, can you tell me what's going on, right? Because this is, in my scientific mind, is not grasping this, right? And then I'm like, what, is there something? It's like, she's like, oh, I talk to them. I'm like, you talk to the cells? I every day I pick them up and say, hey, how are you guys doing? And I'm like, should I call some help? No. And then I'm like, you okay? Yeah, you're okay. So, I talk to them, and then when they're starting to slow down, I said, hey guys, let's move up, let's do it, right? They're going too slow. Come on. And then sometimes I get upset with them. I was like, guys, I need an experiment. Come on, team, And I focus on it, and that's it. What is she doing? She's projecting her very spiritual body. She's expanding it to the point she can influence the fate of transcription factors in a cell line in petri dish. Is that surprising? Not if you know Spiritism. Now you're like, oh, come on, give me something new, right? This is like boring. This is yesterday. What's up? Already give me something different. ChatGPT knows that already. But for a trained scientist in cell biology, that absolutely killed me. Because I'm like, listen, now there's a good chance there's a level of bias in my studies that is independent of any physical factor you can think about. Now, as a scientist, the scientists in the room are probably like, yeah, get rid of all your papers, there's no bias. Like, yeah, thank goodness that actually science is biased, so I don't have to justify that. So there's always bias, right? We minimize the bias. But this is a type of bias I can't really minimize, right? So, I kind of even thought about doing a study on it, but obviously I couldn't get funding for it. I'm just thinking about how should I write this? Kardec knew 1850 words. I was like, no, that's not scientific literature. That. Anyway, that's my struggles as a life as a clinician-scientist and spiritist at the same time, right? But this is exactly what happened. So now, if I have the ability of talk to a cell line in a petri dish and actually change the expression pattern of that cell line, what can I do with my own body that's actually already connected to it? I don't have to, I don't have to do any mantra thing, It is me, right? So it is you, right? It's your body, like your cells responding to you as a spirit, right? So that's now I look at all Kardec again and read everything again. I'm like, oh, now I get it. What the spirituality is trying to tell us since the very first question in the Spirit's book is that if you understand the power that you have, and we've heard about it, or if your faith is as big as a seed of a mustard tree, tiny, you can move that here to there. You can move from to here. You can do. But it's not because it's magical, because everything makes sense. The power, see, now is okay. So the power from above, or the energies that we receive from God, because we're immersed into this co-creative environment with God, where God creates with his own thoughts, right? And we're embedded into it. And now I can take that energy, project in my perispirit, and make my body change because of that. So now, how do cures happen? Do I need a medium to cure myself? Serious question. No. But do I need disease? Yes. Because the disease is the cure mechanism. Right? That's like a crazy part of it, right? Because if that rupture is occurring, it means that something happened at some point that made that happen. And I have to repair it. And repair it means sometimes getting a new body to get rid of it. And my new body is going to come with that thing embedded into it. Why I need to clear it out. So in a way, our bodies are like this magical sponge, right? The physical body that will absorb and filter. Like, you know what I like to think? Like, I have this crazy idea sometimes, and forgive me if I'm going too crazy right now. But you know, I buy these filters from my fridge. They're for activated carbon filters. Like, have you seen those? There's really nothing in there. It's like a bunch of carbon and different texture pore sizes of things that capture elements that go through. Nothing fancy about it, but it works, right? It's like a gravity flow, different particle sizes. At the end, you got water that has less embedded gases and less particles, right? That's all it is. And you don't need carbon. You don't need carbon in your toothpaste, by the way. So you know, like I know people like to sell this black toothpaste, nothing right. Another tangential story, Teresa. I'll go back and I'll behave. But now think about your physical body as this interesting charcoal carbon filter, right? That you kind of put it on like a shirt, like you just dress on, right? And allows that's now area of instability, or that carries that negative imagery that you created to your perispirit, now can filter through it and be clean. But for the eyes of the spirit incarnated, we're going to look at it as like, I had a tiny little cancer on this thing, right? That's bad, yes. That's not good, right? But I'm cured. Because that disease basically was able to get all the way from the perispirit through your body, and you treated it, and you're done. You just cleaned something that was probably much worse to begin with. But God is so perfect, supremely just and good. We forgot to remember that part, man. You know. But he's so supremely just and good that instead of making us redo all 100% of what we've done before wrong, which would be kind of catastrophic, by the way, because we don't do that with our kids, right? Typically don't. Like we alleviate a little bit. I say, oh, you know, it's okay. You know, just give a hug and all good, right? So if we can do that, like think about God. My goodness. So but he will allow certain things to occur in our bodies, right? To be that cleansing mechanism. Now, this is not only about cancer. No, I study cancer, so I'm totally biased again. You guys can see that happen, right? But now, think at the tissue level, that's like a tissue section, and every one of those cells connected to a perispirit, and how intense that connection is, right? So that's what we're talking about. So if you see when you discriminate, so your perispirit there, the middle part, carries those images. I put the little clouds there just to make it kind of a friendly, like rated G kind of thing. But that will be an image of all the stuff we've done. Some things are rated and mature. Right? I can't put it in there, but you can get the sense of it. And then when you come back, what does that do to your physical body? Will cause, and this is by intelligence, will cause, for example, your immune system to not work well, and you have some infections, for example, right? It can cause, like in the book, in the Greater World, right? It always talks about schizophrenia, for example, and mental health diseases, and how does that is connected to the perispirit too? Same way. How areas of instability or changes to the perispirit will reflect on the capacity of a prefrontal cortex to process information. And then you have someone who has, for example, ADHD, for example, right? So neurodivergent, that's normal. That's them, right? It's just the processing of information is slightly different than another person. And that's fine. That is a way that the perispirit is finding to cleanse out those changes that we imprinted on our physical body, perispiritual bodies, right? And some mutations, for example. Do you want to know another great example? Sorry to, I'll go back to the topic. Roll, it's fine, don't call me again next year. There's another interesting thing. You take twins, they're identical twins, right? So every single cell of those two individuals are exact copies from the same original cell. Exact same. And they divide, they turn two identical copies and they form two identical bodies, right? Are they the same? Absolutely not. But of course, that's clear because there's two different spirits, right? You can argue that, and yeah, absolutely. But are their physical bodies the same? Even if they come, and there's studies on that, if they come to the same house, eat the same thing, go to the same school, and have exact same practices, are they different physically? Yes, because their perispirit is imprinting modifications to the expression of those cells at the protein level, the genetic level, we call post-translational modifications that are independent of how identical the DNA is. That's proven by science. It's proven. But we spirits don't see it. The spirit is like, oh, you know, it's all magic kind of thing. No, it's not. It's science 101. It's like what we're studying in university, right? Of course, I can't have this exact same lecture to my colleagues. It's going to be slightly more problematic. But I've been talking about this to people in different levels with some evidence, and it's been interesting. Interesting. That's it. But there are multiple layers of levels of changes to the cells that occur that are directly related to the perispirit. In other words, you in command, right? That's why identical twins are not actually. Okay? So evolution to worlds, and there are Louise beings again, an example of infections, right? And how those infections tend to occur and why the susceptibility to infections can be very significant, right? In certain individuals versus others, how the immune system works, for example. And there's all these things we call idiopathic leukopenia. We see this all the time, like there's all the doctors in the room here. What does that mean? I don't know what it is, but for some reason, the leukocytes in some people are never high enough to fight infections. There's no cause. Like, yes, I know the cause, you know? It's just them. It's actually their perispirit that brought in this information from a previous experience that got imprinted onto the gene that regulates leukocytes formation, right? In tertiary lymphoid organs and all that. And they just don't have the capacity to grow enough. So they have low leukocytes. Bingo. Science explains it one more time. But science from Spiritism is not science from my lab. Because the science from my lab does not explain that, right? You can keep going. Oh, I like this one. So this is another example, right? So the cells on the left side, it's just normal bone. Like this is normal cortical bone, and this is the, I know I'm a pathologist. I'm really sorry for that. I have to bring this slide, this pathology, right? So if I don't, I just kind of weird, right? As a pathologist. Pathologists are strange by nature, so you forgive me, okay? Because I like to see it, like my wife tells me all the time. Did you see your pink and purple things today? And I'm like, yeah, a lot of them. That's my life. What can I do? Like, you know, I'm glad people like me exist. I don't know. Like, but you know, you have the bone there with a tiny little, just a tiny little cell, right? That's an osteocyte, like a little cell in the middle of the bone there in the beginning of the arrow. That weird looking, abnormal, hyperchromatic large cell at the end of the arrow is exactly the same cell. but it's mutated, it's transformed. Now it's a tumor, and it's malignant, and it's very aggressive. So what happened to that cell? And science would say, well, you got a random genetic mutation, sorry. Right? Nothing is random in the universe. We know that, right? Nothing's random. So what happened? In that particular area, and I don't know why, and we don't need to be finding explanations for why that happened. Kardec told us that. Please stop doing this. Because I could bring a million cases and it's like, oh, I see this person did this in the past, and now this is what happened to them. It's not a good exercise, right? But in this case, most likely, there was a rupture in that coordinating effect for the perispirit to those cells that allow the cells to start to go out of control. And being out of control means sometimes changing their own expression patterns and mutations happen. And there you go. So now you develop a tumor on that site. Right then I have some more examples. This is a carcinoma from the mouth, something I like to study too. Okay. Now, I absolutely love that because I find that explains a lot of things too. And I bring that passage almost all the time I give a lecture, which is the spirit is like a traveler embarking on a dangerous voyage, not knowing if he'll meet death on the waves ahead. Ah, that's tough, right? Can you imagine? Right? So actually, going back to the spiritual world is a lot better, right? Think about it. So going back to the spiritual world, you kind of know, like, body's out, I'm spirit again, I'll see everything, Anyways, I'll deal with what I have to deal with. But now coming in here is like, you don't remember anything. You're going to go to this strange body that's going to be imprinted with everything you've done before. You have no idea where you're going to be. What are the trials you're going to have? We're going to be there for you, but good luck. Take your ticket, walk out of here, right? That's a tough one, okay. And that's just to end now, before my timer starts to buzz out of control there. I have a few minutes. This book, I think, gives an absolutely amazing example of everything that we talked about today, right? So we start Antonina with this diverted prayer. We all remember that. She's praying for her, mother-in-law who is not doing well, Zamira, right? And not realize that her own mother, right, was the one that was the obsessive spirit of her mother-in-law at the time. And it's a very complicated story. I definitely don't want to go through the entire thing, right? But, I like this, like these drawings, like, that's the story of Zamir and Odila. And I bet you everyone reading this book for the first time is going to stop at Odila, the first chapter, say, Odila is such a horrible, nasty person, right? It's an obsessor. It's going to do all these bad things, right? Not to realize that she's the one that's going to save the day at the end of the story, right? And it's funny that, we change to judge a lot. Good example of that. I spoiled the whole book. No, there's more to it though. There's more to it. Believe me, there's more to it. But this is what I want to bring. It's the story of Giulio, right? So Giulio, again, when you start to read the book, we're going to realize that, oh my goodness, is a 4-year-old, he'll discarnate, like he'll drown. It's a very tragic event, very early. So everybody obviously look at that. It's like, oh my God, this is a disaster. He goes back to the spiritual world, and we start to listen a bit about the story, right? He'll go to Larda Benson, Irmã Blandina is there, helping all the kids that discarnate at early age. Obviously, if you now know that your perispirit is controlled by you as a spirit and manifest in any way, it could take any shape and form. If you discarnate at a young age, sometimes you're going to have a hard time to bring your perispirit back to an adult shape, right? Because you're still traumatized with the memories of a kid in your spirit. So your perispirit will just show that image, right? So that's what they do. They treat them as kids, although they're not kids, right? Their spirit's older than we are, right? But that's the moment of that transition, right? And Giulio now has this very severe lesion on the glottic space, right? And we hear then that is because he tried to kill himself by poisoning, and the poisoning caused this devastating injury in his glottic area that was imprinted into his perispirit. And now when he comes back, he's going to have severe throat infections. So much so that his mother also had throat issues during pregnancy. So see how powerful that is, the connection between the maternal and the fetus perispirit, so intense. that she could also feel that negative energy that was building up in the perispirit of the incarnating baby, right? And he comes back now incarnated again at the end of the story. I'm not going to tell much more about it, but I have to say that he's obviously born with a lot of issues. Where? In his throat, right? From an incarnated perspective, we see that it's like, oh my God, how does God allow this to happen? Celia's, that is actually the cure of that kid. We can help, we can do all sorts of things to help them. But what is cure? Talk about cure. What is cure? Right? That's a good concept. We can have another, maybe not today, because now I'm getting bad looks already. Okay. Thank you. 2 minutes warning. Oh, 2 years? Yeah, in 2 years. Okay, 2 years. Okay, so that's the, oh, I'm not gonna show that. Okay, yeah, that's the end of the story. So cute. Okay. Okay, so what can I do just to wrap it up, right? So constant goodness generates constant goodness. Oh my goodness, that's perfect. So see, it's not like sometimes goodness generates sometimes goodness, right? So you have to pay attention to the words. Like, that doesn't make a difference, right? So constant goodness, and that while uniting continues in good, all the evil that is piled up by us is attenuated. Oh yeah, there's this, that's the consoling part of Spiritism, right? We have to bring it at some point, right? Disappearing upon the impact of the helpful vibrations generated in our favor. So yeah, everything we do in the positive, every blessing we receive, every pass, everything we do would be infusing good energies in our favor, right? And without the express necessity of resorting to the help of disease. So do we need disease? No, we don't, right? But we can do things without it. And that's why sometimes you can have a medium and get rid of this for us. Yes, if we deserve it, if we're ready for it, if the context is correct, that can happen, right? To eliminate the remnants of darkness that may eventually be incorporated into our mental background, right? And continue Andrea Louise Seam, which I really like that book. And I can't read from here that well. I'll give you for that. Okay. Support of others creates protection for ourselves. Oh, so support for who? Others. Oh, like I thought it was just like helping, for others, right? So that's what we do. We heard about the first lecture, right? That's exactly what we talked about. We're teaching the kids, right? That's exactly it. Which is why the principle of Jesus, uprooting us from animality and pride, vanity and greed, cruelty, avarice, and exhorting us to simplicity and humility, fraternity without limits, without borders. Yeah? I know I had to get that one. And without limits, and to unconditional forgiveness. Again, look at this little modifier terms, right? So it's like, oh, I forgive you, not tomorrow. Like, yeah, unconditional, right? Establish the perfect immunology. Immunology is the system or the study of the immune system responses. In other words, that get rid of stuff that we don't need or we don't like. It's not good for us, right? In our inner life, strengthening the power of the mind in self-defense through your perispirit against all the destructive and degrading elements that surround us. So that is really the ginormous summary of what we have to talk about today, how the perispirit is this archival system of who we really are, and how it's the most, at the same time, is the most powerful tool that allows us to be better, improving, right? And moving along, right, in this pathway that we have of us of perfection. Thank you, guys.